Welcome back, Numismatics Hub. There are moments in history when something seemingly ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because of what it was meant to be, but because of what it ends up becoming. A story, a legacy, a symbol of a specific time, all wrapped into something small enough to be tucked into a pocket, flipped through fingers, or passed across counters unnoticed. The year was 2000, the dawn of a new millennium. Across the world, people were looking forward with hope, with anticipation, with excitement. Y2K was fading into memory, and humanity was adjusting its eyes to a brighter, digital future. Canada, like so many other nations, marked this shift with celebration, with reflection, and, interestingly enough, with coins. But not just any coins. In the year 2000, the Royal Canadian Mint took an ambitious, creative, and deeply cultural step forward. They didn't just want a stamp medal, they wanted to tell stories. Stories that Canadians could hold in their hands. Stories that spoke of identity, unity, values, and dreams. They launched a program that would produce a series of commemorative 25-cent coins, each representing a different theme, one for every month of the year. It was called the Millennium Quarter Series, and one of those quarters, just one, would become far more than just a piece of circulated change. This was not a collector's coin in the traditional sense, not struck in gold, not encrusted with diamonds, not hidden away in velvet boxes. It was meant to be part of the everyday. And yet, decades later, it would rise through the ranks of numismatic legend, catching the eye of experts, collectors, historians, and casual coin hunters alike. Not because of what it looked like at first glance, but because of the story beneath the surface. If you lived in Canada at the time, chances are you remember these quarters. Maybe you saved a few in a drawer, or tucked them into a jar, or maybe they came and went in your change, barely noticed. 12 unique designs were released, one for each month of 2000. Each one bearing a word, a concept, a value that Canadians across the country could recognize. Pride, ingenuity, freedom, wisdom, family, celebration, and more. They weren't flashy. They were modest, thoughtful, elegant. And for a while, they were just coins. But something fascinating began to happen. Over the years, one design, subtle and seemingly common, began to stand out. Collectors noticed variations, slight inconsistencies, details that didn't quite match others in circulation. One version, in particular, would spark curiosity. The Pride Quarter, released in January 2000. The design, featuring a stylized map of Canada formed by a cluster of tiny human figures, was meant to symbolize national unity. It was beautiful in its own right, a reminder that the strength of a country lies in its people. But some of these coins, as it turned out, were different, quietly different. The Mint had produced millions of these coins, over 20 million of each monthly design, in fact. But among those millions, a very small handful were struck under slightly different conditions. A rare batch, a small run, perhaps a test, perhaps a transition. The exact reason remains uncertain. And that uncertainty, that mystery, is part of what makes these specific coins so fascinating today. In the world of coin collecting, rarity is only one part of the story. What truly captivates people is the narrative behind the metal. The why and how matter just as much as the how much. And with the 2000 Canada 25-cent coin, especially those rare variations, there is a story to be told that few outside numismatic circles have fully heard. Some say it's all about the planchet, the blank metal disc used to strike the coin. Others believe the die used for certain pieces was misaligned, retooled, or replaced mid-production, leading to subtle but vital differences. Then there are those who point to the composition of the coin itself, noting that a handful may have been struck in nickel instead of the standard plated steel, a shift that would have never been intended for mass release. These theories swirl around, each with its own merit, and the truth likely lies in a combination of all three. But the mystery itself only adds to the coin's allure. Collectors began comparing notes, weighing coins, studying edges, measuring dimensions. Some discovered that certain 2000 quarters sounded slightly different when dropped on a hard surface, an acoustic clue pointing to a possible composition difference. Others looked closer at the design, noticing tiny misalignments, minute details in the figures that formed the map. The more they searched, the clearer it became. Not all 2000 quarters were created equal. And then came the sales. Quiet at first, private trades.
Listing en niche forum.
Then on larger marketplaces, prices started to rise. First $20, then $100, then thousands. The rarest versions of the coin, those in pristine condition, bearing the telltale signs of something gone subtly and beautifully wrong, became numismatic gold. And yet, most of the public remained unaware. To them, the 2000 quarter was just another bit of pocket change. But among the initiated, it had become something more. A holy grail hidden in plain sight. A coin that could be sitting in someone's kitchen drawer right now, unrecognized, uncelebrated, unspent. It's not just the coin's mystery or rarity that drives its value. It's the cultural moment it represents. The year 2000 was more than just the turn of the century. It was a moment of national reflection for Canada, a pause to consider its identity, its values, its people. The quarter in question, marked Pride, captures that sentiment perfectly. People joined in unity, a nation looking forward. And for the few who hold the rare version of that coin, they're not just holding a collectible, they're holding a piece of symbolic time. Over 2 decades have passed since the coin was released. Many of those quarters have been lost, spent, damaged, or melted. But some remain, hidden away, sleeping, waiting. Every once in a while, one surfaces, found at the bottom of an old jar, or tucked into a forgotten collection. Each discovery reignites the excitement, the questions, the whispers. What makes a coin worth more than its face value? Is it the metal, the design, the scarcity? Or is it something else entirely? Something more human? The stories we tell, the emotions we attach, the history we embed in cold, hard metal. Whatever the answer may be, there's no denying that this particular 25-cent piece, minted in the year 2000, has become something special. That as more stories began to surface from collectors and casual finders alike, the fascination surrounding the coin only grew deeper. People from across Canada, and even outside the country, began sharing anecdotes, stories of how they had stumbled upon one of these rare coins, often without realizing its potential value at first. There was the man from Nova Scotia who, during a routine night of sorting through a decade-old coin jar, discovered one that felt heavier, almost imperceptibly so, and had a slightly different tone when dropped on the table. He wasn't a collector. He had never cared much for coins. But something about this one felt different, and that subtle curiosity led him down a rabbit hole that would change his perspective entirely. Others told stories of passing a coin from hand to hand, noticing nothing at all until much later, when an idle search on the internet revealed that something they had ignored, perhaps even spent without thought, might have been worth more than their car. This, of course, added an element of urgency to the quiet treasure hunt. People started checking their change more closely. Families went through drawers, coin jars, and old wallets, brushing off dust and hoping to find that one elusive piece that could turn an ordinary afternoon into something unforgettable. And yet, for every person who found one of these special 2000 quarters, there were thousands who never did. That only heightened the intrigue. The idea that something so potentially valuable could still be hiding in plain sight, circulating unknowingly among millions of hands, added an irresistible sense of mystery. It became less about the money and more about the chase, the possibility, the romance of the unknown. But to truly appreciate what makes this coin so unique, one has to step back for a moment and understand the immense task the Royal Canadian Mint undertook at the turn of the millennium. Producing 12 different 25-cent coins in a single year, each one with its own custom design, engraved with care and intention, was no small feat. These coins weren't just manufactured. They were curated, a celebration of Canadian values, 1 month at a time. The designs themselves were submitted by everyday Canadians in a massive nationwide contest held in the late 1990s. Thousands of entries poured in. Artists, schoolchildren, retirees, and professionals all contributed their visions of Canada's future. What resulted was a rich tapestry of creativity, community, and optimism. The Mint selected 12 final designs, one for each month of the year 2000. Each was to represent a value or a virtue, something aspirational, something reflective of what Canada hoped to be in the new millennium. The January coin, aptly named Pride, depicted the nation's geographic outline, cleverly constructed from stylized human figures. The message was powerful. A nation is more than land. It is its people, diverse and united. The symbolic strength of that image, combined with the fact that it kicked off the Millennium series, gave it a certain prominence in the collection. But it wasn't until years later that the true significance of this coin began to surface. Among the millions produced, some featured anomalies so subtle that most people wouldn't notice them without a trained eye. For instance, while the standard version of the coin was struck on plated steel, there is evidence that a few were mistakenly, or perhaps experimentally, struck on pure nickel planchets. This would have been unusual, as Canada had officially moved away from using pure nickel for circulation coins years earlier. And yet, these nickel versions existed. Heavier, slightly different in color. A whisper from the past that somehow found its way into the future. There were also reported differences in the rim or edge of the coin. Some collectors noted a variation in the reading, the tiny ridges around the edge. Others pointed out that the alignment of the reverse image seemed just barely offset on some examples. The human figures that made up the map of Canada on these rare versions weren't quite as sharp. Or perhaps they were slightly shifted. It was never enough to make a casual observer pause. But to those who knew what to look for, it was everything. Word spread slowly. First in collector circles, then through online forums and niche groups dedicated to Canadian currency. The stories gained traction. People began posting photos, weighing their coins, analyzing every scratch and curve. Disagreements arose. Was this the rare version, or just a well-worn standard coin? Could the composition difference be detected with a simple magnet test, or did it require lab-level analysis? These debates didn't hinder the excitement, they fueled it. Meanwhile, a strange pattern began to emerge. Many of the coins that turned out to be rare seemed to originate from very specific regions. Some were traced back to rolls distributed in Ontario. Others showed up unexpectedly in British Columbia or Quebec. This led to speculation that perhaps a limited batch had been minted and distributed regionally as a test or an internal experiment. If true, that would make the number in existence even smaller than originally imagined. This scarcity, combined with the powerful cultural and symbolic meaning of the coin, created the perfect storm for value. Not just monetary value, but emotional and historical weight. To hold one of these rare coins is to hold a piece of Canadian pride, a snapshot of national spirit in a year that marked global transition. Interestingly, many of these coins were likely spent without a second thought. Used to buy coffee, slipped into parking meters, tossed into fountains with wishes. No one thought to check the year or the design. Why would they? It was just another quarter. Only it wasn't. Not entirely. And that's what makes the entire story so enthralling. The idea that someone, somewhere, used a coin worth thousands of dollars to buy a bus ticket. That kind of possibility lingers in the imagination, turning each transaction into a mystery. A what if? Some collectors began to specialize exclusively in the 2000 quarters, building complete sets of all 12 designs, then hunting obsessively for any and all variations. The Pride coin, already significant due to its position as the first of the series, became the crown jewel. Finding the rare version, especially in mint condition, was like finding a diamond in a pile of stones. The odds were slim, but they weren't zero. And that possibility, that tiny sliver of hope, is what keeps the story alive today. It's what makes people look more carefully at their change, what inspires late-night hunts through old coin jars, and what fuels the market for these coins even now, decades later. But this isn't just a story about a mistake at the mint. It's not just about metal or mint marks or edge details. It's about what we, as people, choose to value, what we attach meaning to, how we take something as small and overlooked as a coin and use it to tell stories, to capture moments in time, to pass on messages across generations. This is the power of coins, not just as currency, but as storytellers, as tiny, tangible bits of history, as accidental legends. And while the exact number of rare 2025-cent coins remains unknown, perhaps only a few dozen in mint condition, perhaps slightly more in the wild, their impact continues to grow. Because with each passing year, their rarity increases. More are lost, more are spent, and fewer are found, and somewhere, someone may still be carrying one in their pocket, unaware that they're holding a quiet treasure. Over time, what started as a subtle curiosity morphed into a serious hunt, not just among veteran collectors, but also newcomers who found themselves pulled into the gravity of this coin's unfolding mystery. Forums lit up with photos, comparisons, weighing scales, magnetic tests, and anecdotal reports. This one feels heavier, someone would say. Mine has a strange ring when tapped. Another would post close-up images of the obverse and reverse, circling areas where the design felt ever so slightly out of line, asking others if it might be one of the rare ones. The world of numismatics, already detailed and intricate, welcomed this chaos like a spark in dry brush. Suddenly, new conversations were emerging not just around the year 2000 coins, but about how such subtle minting anomalies could cause ripples through an entire generation of circulating currency. What made this coin truly exceptional wasn't just its design or commemorative nature. It was that this was a coin intended for the public. It was meant to be touched, exchanged, used, and even forgotten. But fate, perhaps, had other plans for a few special pieces. Delving into the actual production process at the Royal Canadian Mint during that era gives us a clearer picture of how such rare variations might have come to exist. The Mint, known globally for its precision and innovation, does not often make mistakes. But even in the most controlled environments, anomalies occur, not because of negligence, but because of the sheer scale and complexity of minting operations. In the year 2000, the Mint was managing the regular production of standard coinage, while simultaneously launching a massive nationwide commemorative campaign. Dozens of dies had to be prepared, tested, used, retired, and replaced. It was during these moments, those transitions between dies, those tests between batches, when something different might slip through. In the case of the Pride 25-cent coin, the leading theory among seasoned experts is that a test batch may have been struck using leftover pure nickel planchets, blanks left over from earlier minting years before Canada transitioned to plated steel coins. These blanks, possibly indistinguishable from the newer ones to the naked eye, would produce coins that looked almost identical but were slightly heavier, with a different acoustic tone and distinct electromagnetic signature. Such coins would still have passed casual inspection and entered circulation like any other. Only those who weighed, measured, or x-rayed them would know the difference. But it wasn't just the composition. Another layer to the rarity came from the strike quality and die alignment. Some coins were reportedly double-struck, subtle overlays in the design that, while invisible to many, became focal points for collectors. Others showed what are known as die cracks, tiny raised lines on the coin's surface caused by minute fractures in the die itself. These errors, though unintentional, are beloved in the numismatic world because they make a coin unique. Imperfections that should have been flaws become the very essence of value. There's a kind of romance in these imperfections. The idea that a coin, meant to be identical to millions of others, somehow emerged slightly different, unique in a sea of uniformity. That uniqueness, coupled with the coin's symbolic message of national pride, makes it more than just a rare piece of metal. It becomes a conversation, a representation of individuality within unity, which ironically mirrors the design itself. A map of Canada formed from distinct human silhouettes. As collectors sought out these anomalies, their efforts became more organized. Some began charting the distribution of the coin across provinces. Others created databases to document weight, magnetic properties, and edge reading patterns. With each new confirmed sighting of a rare variant, the legend of the coin grew stronger. News outlets occasionally picked up the story, running human interest pieces about people who had found valuable coins in the most mundane of places. A garage sale, parking meter, a school lunch tray. But these weren't just stories about money. They were stories about awareness, about paying attention, about the magic that can hide in the unnoticed. Suddenly, coin jars weren't just clutter, they were treasure chests, and the act of receiving change became a little thrill. The idea that something so small, so easily overlooked, could change your day or your life was intoxicating. It's worth noting that Canada has a long and respected history of minting collectible coins. From commemorative silver dollars to iconic Olympic coins, Canadian currency has often carried more than just monetary value. It has carried stories. But the 2000 Pride Quarter exists in a class of its own because it bridges two worlds, the everyday and the extraordinary. It wasn't sold in collector sets or proof boxes. It wasn't given a special colorized finish or encased in acrylic. It was meant to jingle in pockets. And yet, through a combination of timing, design, and perhaps just a touch of mystery, it became something more. Stories also began to emerge from inside the collecting world. Dealers who had unknowingly passed on these coins, unaware of their value at the time and later regretted it. Seasoned experts who now kicked themselves for not paying closer attention in the early 2000s. We just didn't know. One collector admitted in an interview, they looked like all the rest. You wouldn't think to weigh them. Not back then. It's these kinds of stories that turn a coin into folklore. And with every new retelling, the mythology grows. Not in a fabricated way, but in a very human way. Because we don't just collect coins, we collect the stories they carry. We collect the memories tied to where we found them, what we were doing, how we felt. And a coin like this, so ordinary, so modest, becoming so rare and sought after, speaks to something deeper in all of us. The thrill of the hidden gem, the unexpected surprise, the tiny, shining symbol that maybe, just maybe, we overlooked something valuable. And so, the hunt continued. It still continues today. Social media brought a new wave of energy to the search. Hashtags, TikToks, and YouTube videos lit up with coin-checking tutorials and "look what I found" posts. Viewers young and old began rummaging through jars, purses, drawers, and even banks in search of the elusive coin. Videos were posted showing magnet tests, slow pans over coins with dramatic music, comments filled with, "I think I have one," and "how can I tell?" And behind all of it, the growing question, just how many are out there? The Royal Canadian Mint has remained respectfully silent on the matter. Whether the variant was intentional or accidental, they've neither confirmed nor denied the existence of a pure nickel batch. That silence, far from diminishing interest, has only poured fuel on the fire. Because in mystery lies allure. And this coin has become, perhaps unintentionally, one of the Mint's most captivating riddles. Some estimate that only a few dozen high-grade examples of the rare variation remain. Others think it could be fewer than 10. And while no official count exists, what is universally agreed upon is this. The combination of symbolism, rarity, and mystery has transformed this humble 25-cent piece into something unforgettable. But this is not yet the end of its story. There is still more to uncover, more layers to peel back, more corners to explore. From the communities that have formed around the hunt to the technical analysis that has revealed new theories, the journey of the 2000 Pride Quarter is far from over. And perhaps, right now, someone is watching this video, pausing it to go check their own coin collection, not realizing that they might be just moments away from discovering something they never expected. A tiny piece of the Millennium, a slice of history, a coin that was never meant to be special, and yet somehow, unbelievably, is. And when you realize just how much it's worth now, everything changes.